People have been asking me for a while to cover Shin Sonic, or aka Shinnick, and now that I've looked into the character, I've learned that he actually has a pretty in-depth backstory. So in this video, I'm going to start off with some of the basic facts about Shin, and then we're going to go over each of the tape/animations from the creator called Evanmus. I'm just going to call him Evan for this video. And then after that, I'm going to explain what I think Shin actually is, because this obviously isn't the regular Sonic. Now, Shinnick was created back in 2020 by the YouTuber named Evan, and he was described as being a primal, unhinged being that has taken the form of Sonic, but doesn't have any of his heroic properties and some minor differences as well. When you take a close look at him, you notice that his shoes are different, he isn't wearing the iconic Sonic socks, and he doesn't have that tan patch on his chest and belly. And as far as I can tell, Shin's only goal is to consume, evolve, and cause chaos. Now, if you watch the series of tapes on Evan's channel, which we'll actually go through in the proper order, you can see the evolution take place. Shin starts out as like a very short and thin character to the point where you can actually see his rib cage. And while we don't know exactly why he's starved in the beginning, I do have a couple of theories. The first is that the creator actually took inspiration from Shin Godzilla, and I know a lot of you are young so you won't remember this version of Godzilla, but if I remember correctly, he had like multiple forms, and we'll see here that Shin also has multiple forms, but the first one for Shin Godzilla was almost like a baby or a tadpole, and I think that this is how it kind of is for Shin. He starts off at his weakest form, and then he needs to consume in order to get larger and more powerful. And the second theory that I have here is that Sonic is nowhere to be seen in this series, and I think the reason for that is because Shinnick has actually taken Sonic's form, and now he's basically using the cover of Sonic to go around and consume these animals, as we'll start to see as we go through the tapes. Now in the first tape, we actually see Shin sitting under this tree in the Green Hill Zone. He opens up this lunchbox that has incorrect spelling on it, and this is the first time that we actually see him eat an animal, which is actually a Pocky, which is just a rabbit basically. But this seems to be where his desire to feed started, and once he got a taste for those little animals, he started to go after more and more. The first real victims that we see are this little Flicky here and this robot that's hiding a piglet inside. And a lot of people may just see this scene and just pass over it as like just a funny little clip, but when you pay close attention, you'll notice that the piglet here actually is missing a leg or a hoof. And this will become an important fact once we see Eggman here in a moment. But before we move on to the next scene, I also want to point out that even though this isn't Sonic, Shin is still super fast as we see here. And the bad news is that as he grows larger, this is going to become more of an issue because he gets to keep that speed even though he's going to be massive. Now in the next scene, we see Dr. Robotnik, and it's interesting that he's portrayed as being like a kind man in this animation because that's not the normal take for him. But here we actually see him placing animals into his robots, and this makes the last scene make a lot more sense. Robotnik isn't simply using these animals as fuel for his creations in this timeline, but he is instead giving them a working body because some of these animals have lost a limb. So Robotnik truly is playing the good doctor in this universe. Now this makes Shin upset because he can't eat metal and he doesn't want to have to crack open a metal shell every time he wants to eat an animal, as we kind of hear him say in this interaction. And while Shin threatening Robotnik was interesting, what happened after that is more so. We see Shin pop up very close to the screen with a huge grin, and his shape flickers in and out. But this frame here, I think, shows the monster that he truly is. And if that wasn't enough to convince you, the next two tapes are going to confirm that he is indeed a monster. In a video titled House Footage, it starts off with Shin in his second form, which is a bit taller than what we actually saw in the first tape. But the thing that really stood out here is that Dr. Robotnik is lying on the floor, and it looks like pieces of him have been eaten. And based on how the last tape ended, we can assume that Shin ended up taking out Robotnik because he was sick of him placing animals into these robots. But since Shin is also starving and always wants to consume, I think he actually started to eat Robotnik. And this is how he ends up getting a taste for human flesh. And this will go on to explain why there was an emergency alert that reads, "An unknown threat has been causing harm to people in the area. There have been several mutilations and reported missing persons in the past day. Authorities are currently investigating. Be alert, lock your doors, windows, and arm yourself. Now, in the same video, we also see Shin stalking around a neighborhood and eventually breaking into a house and, by the sound of it, eating another victim. And for the people that may be confused about regular houses being in the Sonic world, if you read some of the comics or even watch some of the TV shows, the Sonic universe does actually have real towns and cities where humans and Mobians live side by side. And I think this is one of the things that makes this series so creepy for people. Shin isn't locked behind some computer screen, but he actually has the ability to roam around and terrorize real people. Now, in the next video, we see Tails sleeping in a cave, but he's woken up by the sounds of footsteps. In the background, we see glimpses of Shin, but now he's on all fours because he's in his third form, which is much larger and more bestial. And unfortunately for Tails, Shin sneaks up right behind him and does this. After that, we get another message explaining that even more people have gone missing, which isn't really a surprise, but then we learn that the number is actually 946 people, which is crazy high when you think about how little time has passed. The message also mentions that not a single body has been found, which isn't really surprising because we've seen the way that Shin can actually devour his victims whole. And as he gets larger, it will become even easier to swallow people and animals with no issue. Now, something else that I want to mention here is that Shin doesn't just seem to end Tails' life, but instead uses his body to create a Shin version of Tails, which I think is what he did to Sonic off camera in the beginning. Because while this thing kind of looks like Tails, it is obvious that it isn't him. And it seems that Shin Tails is also attacking people now, which implies that Shin is similar to Sonic.exe and the fact that he can turn people into servants to do his bidding. And if that wasn't bad enough, at the end of this video, we actually see the first 3 transformations of Shin Sonic, but then a hand pops up that is about half the size of his third form, which means that his fourth form is going to be huge. Now, the fourth tape starts off with some body cam footage from a police officer wandering around a wooded area. As he's walking, he can actually hear howling in the distance, and then he sees Shin Sonic. The creature is now huge. Is gluttony definitely paying off? And as the officer is running, he also sees more creatures that have been affected by Shin hiding in the bushes. And while at first I thought that they were all different animals, they're actually all versions of Tails, which means that Shin has the ability to make multiple copies of the people that he corrupts, which is a truly terrifying prospect. In the video, we also see that Shin catches the police officer and ends up eating his insides and leaving his body to decompose on this bull altar that we see here. And while a lot of people glanced over this part, I think that this is very important. Some people are saying that this statue is supposed to represent the demon named Baal, but I think that this is actually a statue of the demon named Moloch. I say this because Moloch is the demon that is usually depicted as like a half bull, half man, or a minotaur, I suppose, while Baal is usually shown as a man or like this weird spider / toad creature. Also, Moloch deals more with sacrifices, which is what I think Shin is doing with the body of the police officer and some of the other people that he's taken out. As we've learned by watching some of the videos, he can make some of the bodies decompose at a very fast rate, which basically means that he makes the bodies melt away. And I think this is because he's giving these bodies to his demonic overlord. And if that isn't bad enough, we also see this image at the end of the video. In the fifth video, it starts off with Knuckles running through the green hill zone, and then he runs to the area where Shin had actually crushed that Flicky back in the first episode. And it seems like the brutality of the scene really shook up Knuckles. Now, once he recovered, he continued to run until he saw Tails. And thinking that he had actually found his friend, Knuckles tries to get some answers from him, but then Tails reveals that he's just one of the Tail clones, and then he actually splits into 3. And then this is when Shin Sonic actually comes onto the screen. We see here that Shin can change forms at will because he appears in his base form, then he goes to his second form, and after telling Knuckles to try and run,
try to run.
We see him actually go to his third and then his fourth form. And once he goes to that phase 4, Knuckles had no real chance of escaping because Knuckles has always been slower than Sonic in actual lore. In the next part, when we see Knuckles being chained up, he says that this creature cannot be Sonic because Sonic would never do some of the crazy crap that Shin is doing. And Knuckles is obviously correct here, even though Shin doesn't actually give us any hints as to his true identity. Shin then opens his mouth and allows Knuckles to see everything that has been done up to this point. And while Knuckles is in this vision, he actually gets another one of the Super Emeralds. Apparently, Shin needs these emeralds so that he can perform some type of ritual. And while it's hard to say for sure what will happen, this little image here kind of gives it away. So in order to keep Shin from releasing a bunch of chaos, it's basically up to Knuckles to stop him from getting his hands on these emeralds. Now, a popular theory that a lot of people have here is that Sonic is actually the person that is giving Knuckles this information. Many people believe that Shin has devoured Sonic in the beginning, and now his spirit is kind of reaching out to Knuckles and hope that he'll be able to stop this creature. The main evidence for this is that in one of the frames during this flashback, you actually see the words "help us" pop up in blue and yellow, which may implies that Sonic and some of the other victims are still alive in some which way or another, and they're reaching out to Knuckles for help. And just as a little side note here, as I was editing this video and I was looking at the scene where Sonic actually lets Knuckles into his body to kind of see all the things that he's done, in one of those frames, you actually see the image of Malik that I used earlier in this video. But anyway, back to the video. In the final tape, we see that Shin has gotten to a truly enormous size and can move so fast that he causes shockwaves. And he is basically injuring, if not just straight up taking out a ton of people, even when he's not trying to. In the video, we also see that he was looking for an emerald that was hidden in the city, and once he devoured it, he disappeared. We can assume that now he's going out to find more of these gems so that he can complete this ritual. And with that knowledge, it makes sense that at the end of the video, Knuckles is basically gearing up to go hunt the gems down as well, because he's the only one that can really stop Shin now that Dr. Robotnik is gone and Tails is gone, and they were like the two smartest people in this verse for the most part. So now it's basically up to Knuckles and his raw strength to try to figure this out, unless there is like a very slim chance that Sonic is actually alive, because a lot of people theorize that that could be the case. Now, to sum up and kind of give my thoughts on what I think Shin is, I basically think he's a demonic worshiper of the demon named Malik, and he was basically sent to Mobius to throw this world into chaos and sacrifice people to his demon lord. And I think the reason that he took out Sonic and Robotnik first was because he knew that they were the largest threats on the planet. And I also think that he knew that if he took the form of Sonic, it would give him an advantage, meaning that he will be able to use some of Sonic's abilities and also move around freely until he actually put his plan into place. And I know some of you may be watching content saying that Shin actually is like a good guy, or that he didn't mean to do some of the things that he did, but hopefully this video has kind of shown you that all those videos are pure cap. Shin is a absolute menace, and there's no which way or form around it. Also, if you made it to the end of this video, type justice for Tails in the comments. I feel like in every creepypasta or any creepy animation, Tails always kind of gets screwed over. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments, because I know it's not the normal type of content that I make. And if you have some more weird animations that you want me to cover, let me know down below, because right now F&F mods are kind of in a lull. Check out this video on the screen next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another one. Peace, peace.